Thank you all so much for joining us for Saving Black History, the Gullah Geechee Islands, part of our 2023 webinar series, Preserve the Past, Build for the Future. We are recording this session and it will be available for you on YouTube shortly. I'm Susan Glimsher, the Director of Communications, Education, and Outreach at the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. The ACHP is an independent federal agency that promotes the economic, educational, sustainable, and cultural values of historic preservation. We also advise the President and Congress on national historic preservation policy. The ACHP also influences federal activities, programs, and policies that affect historic and cultural properties. We are the only federal agency whose sole mission is historic preservation. A large part of our agency's work is overseeing Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, which requires federal agencies and those receiving federal funding or federal licensure to consider historic preservation when they begin an undertaking. This webinar series fulfills several aspects of our mission: to educate the public about historic preservation, to bring young people into an awareness of our field and related fields, and to build a more inclusive preservation practice. Some of the work we do is in partnership with the White House Initiative on Advancing Educational Equity, Excellence, and Economic Opportunity through historically Black colleges and universities. We are delighted today to have with us Tara Murray, the Deputy Director of the White House Office of Public Engagement. She has been kind enough to join us today to lead off today's webinar. Tara.
Thank you so much, Susan, for that lovely introduction. And thank you to all of your colleagues at the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation for the work that you are doing. And thank you to all of you who are joining us today. When I was asked to speak today, I was remembering just how far I've come. The way that I met Susan and the team is that I presented about Black History Month on an HBCU initiative call just a few months ago. And now from this seat at the White House, I currently serve as the Deputy Director of the White House Office of Public Engagement. As Susan shared, it just reminded me of just how far I've come in my life, and frankly how far we have come as Black Americans. And so I'm honored to be here today sharing with you in celebration of Black History Month. The Biden-Harris administration is committed to equity. We are committed to celebrating this month in a way that shines a light on all of the amazing contributions, the immeasurable contributions of Black Americans to our country, honoring the legacy and the achievements, and also learning with centuries of injustice and confronting the injustices that frankly still exist today. And so I'm just honored to be here with you all, honored to hear from the panelists who I know will speak and share about the rich tradition and culture. And just thank you so much for taking the time to join today. Back over to you, Susan.
Tara, thank you. It's really such an honor to have a representative from the White House. We are delighted to have you here, and we thank you for everything you and your office are doing for this administration. We have a great lineup for our webinar series this year, Preserve the Past and Build for the Future. All of our webinars are held on Wednesday at 3:00 p.m. March 22nd will be Create a Future through Careers in Historic Preservation. April 26th is History Right on Your Campus, Preserving HBCUs. May 24th is Hallowed Ground, Preserving Historic Black Churches. You can register for any of these at the registration link that Lynn is going to put in the chat right now. I would especially like to thank Lynn and two of her colleagues, Jasmine and Ryan, for helping put these incredible webinars together. You can also find our past webinars on the ACHP website. So I'm super excited about our guests today. And so I will just tell you their names and their titles, and then we'll move forward. First, Tendaji Bailey, the Program Coordinator, Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor Commission. Nancy Lutke, Executive Director of the Dafuski Island Historical Foundation. And Queen Quet, the Chiefess and Head of State for the Gullah Geechee Nation. That's a beautiful backdrop, by the way. I love it. So let's get started. Welcome, Tendaji.
Greetings, everyone, and thank you all for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. If you can give me just a moment, and I think we are good. Awesome. So again, my name is Tendaji Bailey, and I am the Program Coordinator for the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor. On behalf of our Executive Director, Victoria Smalls, we like to thank you all for having us to share a little bit about the work that we are doing within the corridor. Before I talk about our organization, I do want to talk a little bit about what and who Gullah Geechee people are and what our culture, some of the aspects within our culture. And so the Gullah Geechee people, we are descendants of Africans who were enslaved on rice, indigo, and Sea Island cotton plantations in the lower Atlantic coast. That is going to be within the states of North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. Our culture has been able to be preserved in a number of ways. One of those include language. The Gullah Geechee language has been something that's been documented dating back to someone we like to amplify and lift up by the name of Lorenzo Dow Turner. He's done some really remarkable work to begin this conversation around Gullah Geechee culture. Pictured here are Sun Michaud, who is a professor of linguistics who is teaching Gullah Geechee as a language at Harvard University. And so what we love is that the language is beginning to be taught in institutions and supported in ways that will continue our preserving efforts. Pictured with him is actually my aunt. Her name is Ernestine Atkins. She has worked for a number of years, decades really, within the St. Helena Island community to help with community services at the historic Penn Center and former school, Penn School, excuse me. And I'd just like to share that she is also one of the people who began the first voyage that happened between Sierra Leone and the United States, and really the St. Helena Island community, where there was a meeting that happened back in the late 80s as well. It's also been able to be preserved in our foodways. Rice is a major component of our diet. We have a well-known dish that many people, if you get a chance to visit the area, I would recommend trying what we call red rice. But also because of our utilization and our closeness to the water, seafood is also a huge part of our diet and a lot of the ways that we've been able to sustain ourselves within our communities. Our major part of how we continue today to preserve our culture. Pictured here is a sweetgrass basket. Many of us may, if you get a chance to visit the Charleston area, or even here down in St. Helena and Beaufort, South Carolina, where I am, you'll notice that we have these sweetgrass baskets, but the origin of those baskets are really out of, it was more of a function, it was out of utility. They were used in the processing of rice within our rice cultivation. The practice of sweetgrass basket actually dates back all the way to biblical times. Many of you may have heard of the story of Moses being placed in a basket to be saved from harm. And while the materials are a little bit different, we actually have those materials. It's called bulrush, which is a thicker material. He was placed in that kind of a basket, and that basket allowed him to get to safety because water was unable to seep into to that basket. So we'd like to continue to practice this tradition, to amplify this tradition. It's also continue to be practiced over in West Africa. We have similar baskets from places like Rwanda, places like Sierra Leone, where that direct connection still exists today. Gullah Geechee culture is also preserved through spiritual expression. Pictured here is a praise house, and there are a number of praise houses, not only within the St. Helena Island. We have about 4 that are still being preserved and open to the public, but all throughout the corridor, you'll be able to find these small houses of worship that formerly enslaved people went to in order to practice their religion, which was also influenced by some of their African traditions. There's something known as the ring shout that would happen within these spaces, where you'd have the clapping of the hands, the stomping and the shuffling of the feet, and that movement would happen in a counterclockwise motion, which is actually something that is still practiced within traditional African communities over in the continent. And so what is the corridor? So as in this map, you'll see the boundary goes as far north as Wilmington, North Carolina, goes all along the coast, down through Charleston, down through Savannah, down through Brunswick, and ends at the bottom of St. Augustine and Jacksonville, Florida. As the program coordinator, I have had the amazing opportunity to travel to all of these communities. Within each of these communities, we all have very similar traditions, but the nuances within each community and the needs of each community are very, very unique. Within the northern region and the southern region, they are in the process of really preserving and creating cultural institutions so that when we encourage our heritage tourism, there are very specific places that people can go. Within South Carolina and Georgia, because most people have associated Gullah Geechee culture with those 2 states primarily, and we want to make sure that we include the additional stories that come out of places like Wilmington and Leland and the Navassa community up in North Carolina, and the St. Johns and Armstrong counties and communities down in St. Augustine and Jacksonville. Some of our initiatives include public education programs. I'm a former educator. I used to be a math teacher up in New York City. And so glad to be able to use those skills within the work that we are doing here. We also do interpretation work with different cultural sites. We work with different partnered organizations in order to do documentation and preservation work. And we also have created a Heritage Tourism Alliance to begin creating tour experiences for individuals and for groups to come through and experience our culture. Just some of the programs that I have been able to participate in the past year. I just started last April, so we're coming up on a year of me being here with the corridor. Up in North Carolina, they had the Brunswick County NAACP Gullah Arts Festival. It was their first time doing it. And we want to continue to support these initiatives very, very soon. So if you are in the Wilmington, North Carolina area, will be the North Carolina Rice Festival, which will be a 3-day event. And there's some information within our website that you'll be able to access to learn more about what's happening there. Here in South Carolina, pictured is an Adinkra stamping workshop that I do in order to talk about our connections to some of the practices that we do within our work. Adinkra stamps and Adinkra symbols, excuse me, go back to West Africa, specifically to Ghana. It's not a language, but the symbols themselves represent different spiritual aspects, different character aspects. And you can see some of that work in the blacksmith, the ironwork that is all throughout Charleston. These symbols have been embedded within the masonry work of some of the formerly enslaved people who were brought here. Down in Georgia, there's a big initiative happening called the Igbo Landing Collaborative Conference. If you have not heard about the story of Igbo Landing, there were a group of enslaved people who were being brought into the Brunswick, Georgia, St. Simon's Island area. And there were a few people who were resistant and refused to be enslaved. And so they made a decision to commit themselves to the waters versus being held in bondage. Down in Florida, and they are also trying to create a cultural institution at the Ebo Landing site in order to continue to tell that story. Down in Florida, at the Amelia Island area, we also like to talk about American Beach. Pictured here is Janetta B. Cole. Her sister has been affectionately known as the Beach Lady, and she did a lot of preservation work, ecological preservation work within the American Beach area, which was the Black Beach in the Jacksonville area, in order to help preserve the dunes. They have a former juke joint and or club that facilitated a lot of the entertainment that happened within American Beach. And they are hoping to raise funds in order to create a museum and cultural institution so that when people visit the space, they'll have something to engage with. And so these are some of the efforts that we are looking to support in the future. And if you would like to stay connected with us, you can hopefully take out your phones and scan this QR code. It should take you to our newsletter so that you can stay updated about all the programming that we are doing, all of the preservation projects that we are partnering with to help support. And again, my name is Tendaji Bailey, and I hope that I've provided some information and look forward to some of the questions that come out toward the end.
Thank you so much, Tendaji. We actually already have a question for you, but we will put that off until we've heard from everyone else. Now I would like to welcome Nancy Ludke from the Daufuskie Island Historical Foundation. Nancy.
And I would like to thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. This is, I'll tell you, I've already learned more from Tendaji than I thought I would ever be able to learn. Unfortunately, I have some gifts. Technology is not one of them. And after seeing his wonderful slideshow, I can only apologize and ask you we have wonderful, wonderful pictures of what I'm going to talk about today on our website. So I would definitely at the Historical Foundation. I am executive director of the Daufuskie Island Historical Foundation. For those of you who may not know even where Daufuskie Island is, we are a little tiny island right off of the Savannah coast. We're in South Carolina. We're the most southerly place in South Carolina. We are 5 miles long, 2.5 miles wide at our widest. And so you could imagine how small we really are. I moved to Daufuskie Island because if you get a chance to visit Daufuskie, you will see why everybody would want to live here. It is a unique lifestyle. It's, we don't have the big marketing and shopping and things like that, but we do have a wonderful, wonderful way of life. And everybody feels that we are trying to preserve the way that our Gullah people lived here years ago, when there was enough revenue from oystering and things where there could be more of them now. It is a real peaceful life, and there is luckily remnants of the life when the island was busier with native islanders. When I moved I've always been interested in history. And when I moved to the island, there were I think there were about 60 people that were living on the island. And many of them, if not probably 2/3 of them, were native islanders. And it became it was very obvious to me that if I was going to make friends living on this island, a lot of them were going to be native islanders. And it's been just a wonderful experience for anybody who moves to an island like that and wants to learn about the culture and the heritage. The problem was due to a lot of issues, but the kids go to high school on Hilton Head Island, and it's just a classic story of how are you going to keep them down on the farm once they've seen New York, that expression, the social life, the commercial life, and so on and so forth. A lot of the kids after they graduate do not return to the island. So we have had a very huge decrease in population of the native islanders. And the thought crossed my mind that who is going to know about the culture and the heritage of this island if somebody doesn't do something about it? So, and most of the people on the island, just about all, felt the same way. And at that particular time, it was the year 2000, the Mount Carmel Baptist Church, which had been used as a church, a Black African-American church, and also had several other uses, but mainly it was known for being Mount Carmel Church #2. #1 was by the water and went away in a hurricane or storms and things. And we thought it was on the market. It was privately held by a woman on Hilton Head, and she was selling it. There was an imminent sale for that church to a real estate company who was going to make it their office and build little condominium cottages around it. And we, as people living on the island, were horrified. And so we went to the woman, said, we would like to try and raise money to buy the church. And she was asking $70,000 for the property. And she gave us 2 months to raise the 70. And so we said, all right, we'll, and mind you, there were 60 people living on our wonderful island. And some people came forth, it was heartfelt that church should not be commercialized. And so the bottom line was we were able to raise $60,000. And she said, in the 2 months, and she said she would sell it to us if we named it after her. And we thought, that is not going to happen. And so we said, no, we'll look for other means, and so on and so forth. Bottom line, she called 24 hours later, and the Daufuskie Island Historical Foundation was formed. And we started applying for the 501(c)(3) and things. And we've never stopped since then. And we turned that beautiful little church, and I'm ashamed, Tenjaji, when I see your slides, that I didn't do a better job of educating myself. But again, all the pictures are on the website. We had to get grants to restore that church, because needless to say, it had fallen into a great state of disrepair, but its bones were good. And so we started writing grants, and I can write grants. I just can't do anything else technical. So we started writing grants. People were very, very generous, and people emptied, both African-American and white people who had lived on the island a long, long time, emptied their barns and things to donate treasures that they had to that museum. So it is a beautiful, wonderful little museum, small but mighty. And it is just, we have no admission to the museum. Anybody can come, and we're open 5 days a week and so on. And then we have thousands of people who visit the museum, because we found that people used to come to Daufuskie for the beach and things. We have 3 miles of beautiful, beautiful public beach, and the tide is changing. We are feeling that people are getting a lot more interested in the history of things. We also found we had a little bit of everything from every era, from the Indians to the Gullah, mainly the Gullah, but not enough. And we found from talking to people that what they were really interested in was the Gullah history and culture. So there was a little school across the road from us called the Janie Hamilton School. It was one of the old Rosenwald schools, and it was really in disrepair. Bottom line, we went to the Beaufort County Board of Education and asked if we could lease it. And we lease it for $1 a year from the Board of Education. And that is our Gullah Learning Center. And it is just magnificent. And it also houses, it's tiny, but it also houses our our community, Defusky Island Community Library. And we spent, again, we got grants and we did that. We also have the Oyster Hall, which was a gathering place for the Burial Society on the island. That building was going into the woods, and that really meant a lot to the Gullah people on the island, and it with its traditions and things. That has been we have completely restored that, and it is soon to be open to the public. It wasn't very safe before, so it is soon to be open to the public. And for those of you who may or may not know Sally Ann Robinson, she is a born and bred Gullah person from the island, and she's also a cookbook author, and she does tours of the island, as do several other companies, and they all are really excited that we're getting ready to have a dedication of that building. So we have a different project every year, and it is very apparent that the Gullah history will be on Defusky forever. So.
Is that it for you, Nancy?
That's it for me.
Well, that was wonderful. Thank you. And don't worry about technology. Everyone loves to hear people speak. And we are going to put a link to the Defusky Island Historical Foundation up. Right. And there are lots of great pictures on your website. So thank you.
Absolutely. And I just did mean to mention that another thing we have done, we have people can't take it. There's so much there that people really can't take it in. We've done wonderful brochures on the Gullah Geechee culture, the Defusky Island timeline, which people are very interested in, because we did have Indians a long time ago. And then we established a historic trail, and we have a map and things where people can go. You get around Defusky in golf carts. There aren't very many vehicles, and where you can go on a self-guided tour. We give them every opportunity to learn as much as they can. And then they come back into the museum, and all of our volunteers all of our docents are volunteers, and say, how do you live on this island? So we count our blessings every day.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Nancy. So now I would like to welcome Queen Quet, the chiefess and head of state for the Gullah Geechee Nation. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Hold on just a little while longer. Hold on just a little while longer. Hold on just a little while longer. Everything why be all right. On a children fight on just a little while longer. Fight on just a little while longer. Fight on just a little while longer. Everything why be all right. Gullah Geechee's everything why be all right. On a chill on everything why be all right. Down here, Panisha line, with dear righteous in this Atlantic Ocean. One of the kind of showing things like that. You see, yeah, they plenty of the crack with it so. Yeah, plenty of the rest of them in the book and kind in yeah, they show. They see sound like the rhythm. They say, look yeah, where's it going sound like? You got to see and rhythm as this your water. Our ancestors, the Igbo, Mandinka, Malinke, Yoruba, Gullah, Geechee, Mendi, Temni, Ifiki, Ibibio. Yeti. And that drum skin. Oh, and then they get him in the bush shop, the brush shop. But the Yamasi, they disto the Cree. Oh, then chillin', a join together, a fight on. Oh, and then they call them what? Again, Semnor. Unconquerable. And chillin', they couldn't just throw them and things like that. And tell me to sound the rest of thing. because we know who we be. If we be Gullah Geechee anointed people, and Jacksonville, North Kakalaki, to Jacksonville, Florida, and Redwassee land, the St. John's River and things like that. That's where we be in the Gullah Geechee nation. So plenty time people are coming here now. They're going to these other places. Well, kill off the culture and things like that. Because people just throw me something, throw upon the chef and things like that. Then I get the life from the people itself. If you know, get who we be. Oh, you have so neat, that hawk, with that long beard, that called Spanish moss, and yet we. And then, on my true little boat, we legacy, what a continue, Polynesia, we call the sea islands on the sea. So plenty of time, otherwise the people have been coming in, they're not yet, they're dead, they're over sand. So a lot of our people took to being multilingual again, like our ancestors were, so that other communities and other cultures would begin to overstand. We've been under too long, so it's time to be over some things. What we're saying when we're speaking. And over the many years that I've worked in various arenas, it's been interesting the type of linguistic journey that I've been on to not only know how to speak my native tongue and the native tongue that was pushed upon Gullah Geechees on the Sea Islands, and to even say, je parle français, comment está ustedes? Mengadef, assalamu alaikum. And to learn various ways to communicate in different communities around the world about my culture and the fact that it still exists, that it still lives. But then to have to learn the language that's different than that of scientists. I'm a computer scientist and mathematician. So to learn the language that we do for engineering and then have to switch into the world of conservationists and preservationists, and to recognize that it only did what Papa used to tell us, gal, going back to old landmark. It only brought me back to the foundational elements of my traditions, my culture, my family, my community, wherein we say we job, we don't preserve. Other people's language say preserve. And so when they say preservation in the Gullah Geechee Nation, what are we really talking about? And what we've seen a lot of is people talking about us without talking to us, and then them interpreting what they believe is our story, instead of understanding that the living archive is the people. And that if you want something beyond preservation, which means just encapsulating it in some type of container, sealing the top, which, as I said to you in Gullah, then doesn't give you life, doesn't give you the breath, but it can hold something. But that something can only be sustained but so long, encapsulated in that jar, in that container that's then shelved for people to come look at and admire until someone says, let's screw the top off and dump it out, and then dispel of it, whether they nyam upon them and excrete them, or some other rest of it throw them away or unspoil. So as much as people would look at my bio and dialogue with me, and as much as I participated in many historic preservation conferences, I quickly let people know when it comes to my culture, I do cultural continuation, not preservation, because it should be embodied in the people on their land, in their communities, and they should decide how it evolves for the future, so that just as it existed in the past and our ancestors had it, we of the present can create the communities and sustain them in a way that our children's children's children will have it in the future. And that means, as my mother taught me, charity begins at home and then goes abroad. So it's nice to have people visit. It's nice to have people work in collaboration, but they must always center the community and have sense about the community's sensibilities in order to continue things, not just lock them up and preserve them, sit them on a shelf, or take pretty pictures and make exhibits out of them. What Gullah Geechees have exhibited is our wherewithal to survive and to thrive in spite of the fact that for generation after generation, people have said that our culture is dead or dying, that our language is dead or dying. But we don't been we in a guina, we're tall and things like that. So when we talk about building for the future, yes, there's a level of preserving what's in the past in terms of keeping artifacts, keeping family heirlooms, and especially keeping family land and keeping sacred historic sites and keeping them in the hands of Gullah Geechees and letting them do their own management of that is critical to what we have in the future. And whether or not it's been so assimilated, it means nothing in terms of specifically Gullah Geechee culture, but becomes part of the great American melting pot instead of that beautiful salad that we all can be nourished from, because we can respect the tomato, even if all we do is love lettuce. If you love the lettuce and then you say, well, I hate the onions, you don't have to do away with them though. Somebody else will love the onions. And so we can have the croutons, we can have it all, and then we can have some nice seasoning that Gullah Geechee people know how to throw on things just so nice and make the colors pop, make the flavor still be in it, and not have it become somebody else's something in an interpretation of what used to exist. So that's why I thought it an honor during this month, Black History Month, to actually come here and celebrate the living culture and making sure that we are not only talking about the past, but that we are going forward into the future, and that that future be guided by them who'd have been here, them what lived this your legacy and things like that. So that when the other rest of people come in here, from Jacksonville to Jacksonville to the Gullah Geechee Nation, even 50 or 100 years from now, they can still yet who we meet from we. Who be the Gullah Geechee. And so it's critical that we think of the terminologies, the linguistics that are part of the work that we do. Because maybe the language you speak in this realm of preservation is not the same language that the communities that you seek to preserve things in speak. Maybe what you value and you put a price tag on is something we can't put a price tag on because it's priceless to us. So my thing is about cultural continuation. And with buildings, historic preservation, that then I hope those are buildings in which we can put on display all of our color, all of our beauty, all of the wee the crack we teach, anything like that, and do it with pride to continue our Gullah Geechee legacy. So I thank all of you for taking the time today to spend this time with us to celebrate who we be down here in the Gullah Geechee Nation, and to continue to help us to fight on just a little while longer, because that's when I know everything will be all right, and that the future we are building will be just like a Sea Island sun in the summertime, nice and bright. Tanky, ACHP, and so glad that Huna bring we on this journey. Now let's sit on this Gullah Geechee shore together and crack we teeth with the rest of Huna Preservation family.
Thank you so much for that. That was really inspiring. We do have some questions, and I appreciate all the speakers. You can bring your cameras up now, and we will ask our attendees to ask their questions. But I would like to start off, if I may, Queen Quet, by asking such an important question.
Mm-hmm.
We know that rising seas are threatening your culture.
Absolutely.
In fact, they're threatening many cultures, but today we want to focus on you.
Mm-hmm.
What is the Gullah Geechee community able to do to try to help stabilize this situation and to prepare for the future?
Yes, I am so pleased that you asked me about that. And I saw the folks in the chat hoping we get to this. So I'm glad you brought it right on up front. One of the major things that I work on a daily basis, and I'm about to fly out to meet with other world leaders again next week to deal with, is climate change. And of course, sea level rise, ocean acidification, and even now heat island effect are some of the negative impacts happening to the sea islands where the Gullah Geechee Nation exists and where our communities are and our historic sites and sacred grounds are. And so as a result of the sea level rise issue, as I often say to people, cotton used to be king. Now it's the tide. As I was growing up, they called it spring tide. Now we have king tides. We have things called sunny day flooding. So now what we have done is we started working with the EPA through a building blocks grant, which you know is a technical assistance grant, not a grant like what Nancy mentioned, where it's a money grant. Okay. And so we formed a project called Greening Gullah Geechee Communities, which helps to build community capacity in terms of adaptation and resilience of the very environment that is the Sea Islands in the southeastern coast. And so we continue to expand on that. We're currently working with the Army Corps of Engineers. And in all of this work and other projects like Gullah Geechee Sea and Me, in which the C is saving environmental actions and the me is in the marine environment that I formed through the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition that I founded. We work in collaboration with a number of environmental partners and what I call a federal government alphabet soup, okay? So that we bring in best practices and hopefully now bring in infrastructure money to actually carry out these sustainability efforts like our South Atlantic Salt Marsh Initiative, that we're doing with Surpass and Pew, and also to raise causeways and other things like this, and then to create bioswales instead of ditches, and a number of other things that use nature-based solutions. So we center Gullah Geechee traditions of mitigating harm on the environment in order to carry all these things out. So we center our continuation of culture, and we know we'll only continue it if we keep this coast here.
That is great. And I think you're right. And I learned a new phrase today that I am going to be using all the time, culture continuation, because really that's what it's all about.
Thank you.
So let me just ask a couple of other questions of our speakers. Well, actually what we're going to do is invite our audience to ask their questions. And if our other speakers would like to talk a little bit about rising seas and climate change in this area, we would love to hear about that as well. So let me start by calling on.
Actually, Susan, I'm going to be asking the questions today to try to get as many in as we can since we're running low on time.
Okay.
The first question was from Dolores Martin. She asked, is Williamsburg County within the corridor? Tendaji?
And yes, I did some checking just now, and yes, it is. In fact, in our management plan, there's a list of all of the counties within all 4 states, and Williamsburg is included. Oh, sorry, if that is in South Carolina.
Great, thank you. We have another question. I'm interested in the work in preserving the music and arts of the Gullah Geechee people that Tendaji spoke of briefly. Could you speak a little more about those efforts?
Absolutely. Music-wise, I would point to Dr. Eric Crawford. He just released a book not too long ago called Gullah Spirituals, where he spent some time here on St. Helena Island, actually at my home church at Ebenezer. It's a historic church here on the island, documenting some of the songs. And what he was able to find is that what we imagine, or so what we know as Negro spirituals, are really the songs that come out of the St. Helena Island community. And so those songs have a history, as well as songs like Kumbaya. You know, it's known kind of everywhere. Kumbaya, my Lord, Kumbaya. But that's actually a Gullah Geechee song. Kumbaya, right, is really the root of that. And it's been documented to be traced back to Darien, Georgia, within the corridor. As far as art, again, the baskets are a major part of what's happening. And they've done a lot of work within the Mount Pleasant area to establish not only a Sweetgrass Festival, but they have a Sweetgrass Pavilion. And there's a lot of work to preserve along Highway 17 in between going from Charleston to Georgetown, what they call Sweetgrass Basket Makers Highway. And city officials have really stepped in to help, fix up some of the stands, and Home Depot, I believe, has also pitched in with wood and paint kinds of supplies to continue those traditions as well.
Thanks so much. Trulesta asked, is there a cemetery on the island? Do you know if soldiers are buried there? And if there are 50 years or older historic grave sites? Anyone?
Yes, on all of our sea islands, there are 100-year-old burial areas. This is and I heard Tendaji calling my name as I was hitting the mic because he knows how much this is at the center of my heart and how much work I do. So in my families in particular, both sides of my family is Gullah Geechee. We have multiple burial areas. Every last one of them has headstones in it that are military headstones. So we know exactly what branch someone served in, all that was here before we were even born. And then there are older burials that are in them that did not have headstones that are of stone. The headstones would have been trees and flowers and other things. So you don't read names now and other things, but the oral history in the family lets us know that every war that was fought in North America, in my family, someone fought in it. So we have that. And then also the town of Beaufort is actually on the island of Port Royal, along with the town of Port Royal. So you have the National Cemetery that was signed into law by President Abraham Lincoln. So of course, that is a massive area. So again, when we go back to talking about sea level rise, it is very important for us to sustain these places because most of our native Gullah Geechee burial areas are along the intercoastal waterway. They are along the marsh. So this is crucial to us. But yeah, every sea island, the families can find graves that date back hundreds of years, in many cases, not just 50.
Thanks so much. Another question, why is that interagency collaboration on cultural preservation efforts so important?
I'll take that one since I'm working with the entire alphabet soup. It is so important because one of the things that we don't prefer to do in the Gullah Geechee Nation is work in silos. We work together, and I think Tendaji would agree. Everything, if it's going out to fix food, y'all love our seafood, even to do that, that's a family effort. That's a collaborative process and project. So that we can make sure that every agency of the government can bring to bear their technical knowledge and any resources and financial resources in particular to help our efforts to continue our culture. It was best for me to gather them all together. So I hosted a historic meeting last year where just about every agency that I could think of that I had a contact in came to St. Helena Island and spent the day with us, actually going around to these sacred sites, to historic sites, to family compounds, and actually then sat down in a circle together and engaged together at the Reconstruction Era National Monument building at Penn Center's National Landmark Historic District. So we made history all over again. And it was very powerful because we had college students there from an HBCU and everything that witnessed that said this changed their lives. So they see that these agencies can work together, just that normally in DC, they look like they don't, right? It's not that they can't. You just had to bring them all together and bring them together around a similar issue and then let each one do what they do best from their arena. So we're still working together, and that is vitally important because they get information to us in the community that we wouldn't know, that they know interagency, and then the agencies get to share knowledge with each other that they're like, oh, we didn't know y'all did this already. We can do this together. And so we just have to pull together the right partners. So it's vital because it lets things go grassroots up as well as hilltop down to the Lowcountry, and it works for us.
Great, thanks. Another question, has the Defusky Historic Foundation established a tax relief fund or a Native owner assistance fund to help Native families maintain ownership as a preservation tool?
That was done several years ago because another one of our missions was to, and I think I have to interject here so people understand why we might emphasize preservation more than continuation. And I understand what Queen Quet is saying, absolutely. And it's up to the people themselves really to maintain that wonderful culture. We only have 16 Native Islanders here left on our island. So it's one of those things that, and in our mission statement, one of our hopes was that we would be able to help people stay on Daufuskie Island, but in their own homes, fix them so they're, they're safe. Same thing with the Oyster Hall, Queen Quet, how it wasn't safe for people to go into those buildings.
I agree.
And it's just one of those things that like quite a few of those people, as I know Queen Quet knows, are really elderly. And we just thought if we don't capture that and place it before people, because Daufuskie is a huge part of that nation. It really is. Just because they were so sequestered, Daufuskie has no bridges. It has the only way to get there is by boat. And so consequently, the people going way back, and some of those old houses, to answer the questioner, is, they're still standing. And unfortunately, some of them are not still standing. And so one of the fears on the part of the Native Islanders was that their taxes would go so high if their homes were improved. And there's been legislation that has been passed that won't happen. And you're good for 20 years, I think, or something. And that enabled people to do more with staying on the island and hoping and praying that their descendants would want to stay on the island. So that was a huge goal of ours. And just by alleviating the high taxes that were very damaging, hopefully, we just keep hoping. So.
And if I may really quickly, I really just recently visited Daufuskie, Nancy. I'm so sorry I didn't get a chance to meet you while I was there.
No, did you go to the museum?
So we had a tour experience with Miss Sally Ann Robinson.
Oh, the best.
And she also, the best. And she also invited us to attend the church service there on the island as well the following day.
Did she
so
sing?
We've had an opportunity. She did sing, and we had an opportunity to really learn about the island's history. And I love the museum, and there's a lot of work that I'd like to talk with you about.
Right, right.
That we can support in the future.
Right, great.
Excellent. We do have another question. When speaking of spiritual expression, you spoke of ring shout dance, which recently I've learned influenced many dances in New York pre-1960. Would you say that there are any more dances that have come from ring shout?
Queen Quet, you want to? But I'll go and start.
I see you, Tendaji. I knew you was gonna do that. Now, see,
No,
I don't like to talk about dancing. I dance, so I don't like to talk about dancing. That's why I didn't rush.
No, I am the dancer. I got it.
You and I both are. So you go ahead, and then I'll see if I need to say anything else.
Yes, ma'am.
They ain't right. They got us on Zoom. We should have been there in person. We could have showed them what we working with. Go ahead.
Hello. The famous dance called the Charleston. That is a iconic Gullah Geechee dance that has been, has been transferred into other spaces and not credited to our community. But there are a number of different instances within our traditions where it's very obvious to see that. Line dancing, just a big part of just moving as a collective and as a community, kind of born out of those traditions as well.
So I would agree, other than the line dance, only because the circular pattern gets broken up by the line dance. But there's a lot of, when we talk about swing out, you mentioned earlier, the juke joint, Tendaji, and you were talking about rendezvous down in Florida at American Beach in particular.
Mhm.
So when you're talking about that and you're talking about swinging out at those dances, that circular aspect, like you said, that movement is still there. That's in the ring shout. And because of the way we do things, even in that collective consciousness and those kind of spaces, it causes the spirit to be invoked in another way that still continues that movement. So it's not about titling a dance. So I wanted to make sure the person asking the question understands that. For us, even ring shout, it is a circular movement. Once we start calling it a dance, then it takes on a different form and tends to mean something else in our community, especially amongst elders. So we don't have names necessarily for that, but there is that energy that brings us back to the motherland and always roots and grounds us here. So it may not be named at in a particular way, like the Charleston that Tendaji mentioned, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Yeah.
So, Tendaji, I sent you a chat message about someone who would like to connect with you. So if you would like to put your email in the chat or just jot that down, it would be great. I want to thank all of our panelists today so much for joining us. This was fascinating. And to everyone who's attended as well, thanks for spending the time with us this afternoon. Please join us for our 4 remaining webinars. And the chat has the link in it if you'd like to sign up for those. We would love it if you would fill out the survey that pops up when you exit. We use this information to make sure we're answering your needs when we plan these webinars. And thank you again to all of you. Don't forget to follow the ACHP on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That was one of my favorite webinars. Speakers and attendees, thank you.
Thank you. It was wonderful for me.
Thank you.
I learned a lot.
Thank you. It's been a blessed time.